Here's something most people never stop to think about. Clint Eastwood made his name in Western movies, became the biggest star on the planet in Westerns, and then personally walked the genre out behind the barn and ended it. Today, we're ranking 10 of his greatest Westerns from worst to best. 3 decades of films tied together by one rattlesnake-gripped revolver. And I'm going to tell you which gun he carried in each one, because with Eastwood, the gun is never an accident. Let's begin. Number 10. Joe Kidd, 1972. We're starting at the bottom with Joe Kidd, the kind of Western that should have been brilliant on paper and just isn't. Written by Elmore Leonard, directed by John Sturges, starring Eastwood at the peak of his powers. But the script feels half-finished, and the famous final scene where Joe Kidd drives a steam train through a saloon was apparently a joke pitched by a producer that ended up actually being shot. Joe carries a standard Colt single-action army with a 7.5-inch cavalry barrel, but the real star is the rifle he picks up during the sniper standoff, a Canadian-made Ross Model 1910 straight pull bolt action, sporterized for the film with a Wollensack 4-power scope and chambered in .280 Ross. Eastwood fires it left-handed because he's actually left-eye dominant, which is the kind of authentic detail you never get in a regular Western. Great rifle, mediocre movie. Number 9. Two Mules for Sister Sarah, 1970. Two Mules for Sister Sarah is one of those movies that's better than its reputation, but worse than its cast deserved. Directed by Don Siegel, starring Eastwood opposite Shirley MacLaine as a nun who turns out to be something other than a nun. Set during the French intervention in Mexico in the 1860s. The chemistry is good, but the pacing in the middle act is off, and the tone keeps shifting between drama and comedy in a way that feels uncertain. Eastwood's character Hogan carries a Colt single-action army through most of the film, picks up a Winchester 1873 saddle ring carbine for longer range work, and in the climactic raid on the French garrison, operates a Gatling gun. That sequence alone earns the movie its place on the list. Number 8. Hang 'em High, 1968. Hang 'em High is fascinating because it's Eastwood's first American-made Western after the Dollars trilogy, and you can feel him trying to figure out whether he's still the same character or a different one. It tells the story of Jed Cooper, a man hanged for a crime he didn't commit, who survives, becomes a deputy U.S. Marshal, and hunts the men who lynched him. It's actually a meditation on the difference between justice and vengeance, a theme Eastwood returned to over and over. He carries a Colt single-action army throughout, no snake grips this time, and a Winchester 1892 saddle ring carbine when he needs reach. The film made over $21 million on a budget of $1.6 million, which is what proved to Hollywood that Eastwood could carry an American Western without the great filmmaker Sergio Leone behind the camera. Number 7. A Fistful of Dollars, 1964. Now we're getting into the territory where every film is genuinely great. A Fistful of Dollars is where the legend begins. Sergio Leone takes Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, reshoots it as a Spanish-Italian Western, casts a 33-year-old TV actor named Clint Eastwood, who just finished 7 seasons of Rawhide, and accidentally invents an entire subgenre of film. Eastwood carries a Colt single-action army with a 5.5-inch artillery barrel and grips inlaid with a silver coiled rattlesnake. He'd been carrying those exact same grips since Rawhide, where his character Rowdy Yates killed an outlaw and took the revolver. So when Eastwood walks into San Miguel in this film, he's carrying his own personal screen prop from his old TV show. The film made $14 million worldwide on a budget of $200,000, and the only reason it ranks at number 7 is because the films above it are masterpieces. Number 6. High Plains Drifter, 1973. High Plains Drifter is the one where Eastwood finally directs himself in a Western, and you can immediately tell he's been paying attention to Leone for almost a decade. A stranger rides into a town called Lago, paints the entire town red, renames it Hell, and waits for 3 escaped outlaws who once killed the town's sheriff. The question of whether the stranger is a ghost, an avenging angel, or just a man with very specific issues is left deliberately unresolved. He carries a Colt single action army throughout, the standard cavalry length 7.5-inch barrel, and the way he uses it sets the tone. He shoots 3 men in the opening minutes without breaking stride or losing his cigar. That single sequence is what makes this film feel different from every Eastwood Western before it. Number 5. Pale Rider, 1985. Pale Rider is essentially High Plains Drifter 12 years later, with a Christian symbolism overlay laid on top, and somehow it works even better. Eastwood plays a character called Preacher, who rides into a gold mining camp being terrorized by a corrupt mining baron. The title comes from the Book of Revelation, where the Pale Rider is death himself. Preacher carries a Remington 1858 New Army revolver, the same gun the Union Army issued during the Civil War, converted to fire metallic cartridges. The iconic moment of the entire film is Preacher reloading by swapping out the entire cylinder rather than reloading individual chambers. He carries preloaded cylinders on his belt like a modern shooter carries magazines, which is historically accurate to how Remington owners actually reloaded in combat. As a backup, he also carries a Remington 1858 pocket revolver in .31 caliber tucked into his belt. 2 Civil War-era cap and ball guns, both converted to cartridges, both carried by a character who may or may not be human. Number 4. For a Few Dollars More, 1965. Now we're in the top half, and from here on out, every film is a stone-cold masterpiece. For a Few Dollars More is the middle film of the Dollars trilogy, the one where Leone and Eastwood figure out what they're doing. The film pairs Eastwood's Man with No Name with Lee Van Cleef playing Colonel Mortimer, a former military officer turned bounty hunter, and the two of them spend the film hunting the same target, the psychotic outlaw Indio. The chemistry between Eastwood and Van Cleef is so good that the entire film works on the dynamic between them. Eastwood is still carrying the same snake-gripped single-action army from A Fistful of Dollars, but this is the only film in the trilogy where he also wears a long brown leather lace-up shooting cuff on his right forearm, which according to legend was inspired by an item Leone saw an actor named Andy Anderson wearing to cover a real World War II shrapnel scar. Number 3. The Outlaw Josie Wales, 1976. The Outlaw Josie Wales is the one Eastwood Western that almost nobody saw coming. Eastwood directed it, Eastwood starred in it, and Eastwood used it to reset the entire Western genre for the second time in his career. The film tells the story of a Missouri farmer whose family is murdered by Union irregulars during the Civil War, who joins a Confederate guerrilla unit, refuses to surrender, and spends the rest of the film fleeing across the West while accidentally gathering a found family of misfits along the way. Josie Wales doesn't carry a single action army. He carries 2 Colt Walker 1847 revolvers, the original 1840s era cavalry pistol that was at the time the most powerful production handgun ever manufactured. The Walker weighs 4.5 pounds loaded, holds 6 rounds of .44 caliber black powder ball, and was originally designed by Samuel Colt and Captain Samuel Walker for U.S. Mounted Dragoons. Eastwood wields a matched pair of them throughout the film like an absolute madman. Number 2. Unforgiven, 1992. Unforgiven is the Western that ended the Western. After he made this film, Eastwood announced he was done with the genre, and he kept that promise. It's also the film that won him 2 Academy Awards, Best Picture and Best Director. He plays William Money, an aging former gunfighter who's been a peaceful pig farmer for years, drawn back into the violent life by the promise of a bounty. And the gun work is a deliberate inversion of every Western Eastwood ever made. Money opens the film by pulling out a Star 1858 Army percussion revolver from a chest in his barn, a Civil War-era double-action cap and ball gun with a unique double trigger mechanism. He hasn't fired it in years, and the early scenes where he can't even hit a tin can are quietly devastating. He picks up a Spencer 1860 carbine for the riding work, and in the climax at Greeley's saloon, he uses the Spencer to start the fight and a greener double-barreled 10-gauge shotgun to finish it. 3 different guns, 3 different stages of a man becoming what he swore he'd stopped being. Number 1. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966. Of course it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's no other answer. The final film of the Dollars trilogy, the longest, the most ambitious, the one with the Civil War backdrop and the buried gold and the 3-way standoff in the cemetery that Ennio Morricone scored with the most famous piece of music in the history of Western film. And the gun Blondie carries throughout is the one most people don't realize is different from the other 2 trilogy films. In A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, Eastwood carried his single-action army with the snake grips. But The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is set during the American Civil War, 1862, which is 11 years before the single-action army was even manufactured. So Leone and his armorer Aldo Uberti settled on a Colt 1851 Navy revolver in .36 caliber, the same gun carried by Wild Bill Hickok and Doc Holliday in real life. Uberti modified it to fire cartridges by specially machining raw forgings to create what was essentially a custom one-of-a-kind centerfire 1851 Navy. So when you watch Blondie draw his revolver in this film, you're watching a gun that does not exist anywhere else in history. That is the #1 Eastwood Western, and that is the #1 gun. Alright, your turn. Where would you have ranked these 10 films? Which one would you move up, and which would you drop? And which Eastwood gun is your favorite? The snake-gripped Navy from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? The Twin Walkers from Josie Wales? Or the cylinder-swapping Remington from Pale Rider? Drop your pick in the comments, hit the like button if this earned it, and subscribe, because we've got a lot more films and a lot more guns to take apart.